Hi everyone, welcome to Hangout with the Book. We're here at the Garvey Heights branch of the Cuyahoga County Public Library. My name is Matt Skavasic and I'm the adult librarian here. We've got some special guests tonight, so I'd like to welcome Kate.
Hi, I'm Kate Merline. I'm also a librarian at Cuyahoga County Public Library. And tonight's Hangout will be a little bit different than some of our previous events. We'll be talking about Tom Perrotta's The Leftovers, and then we're going to be focusing on some other books that we're going to enjoy in the next year, and also some books that we've loved this year.
If you do want to join in and submit some of your own best picks of the year, please join in and submit your questions in the or your titles in the Q&A section there. Or if you want to share some of the titles that you just can't wait are coming out for 2015, you could submit it in Q&A. As we talk about Tom Perrotta's book, if you do have questions or you do want to chime in with your own comments, you can also submit those and we will try to answer them in an abbreviated form, but we will try to get to them. I do want to give a warning that we will be talking about spoilers of the book as we usually do in our Hangouts. So if you don't want to know what happened in the book or you don't want to hear about it, you might want to mute us or click off and come back at a later time. So
you can catch us on YouTube later. So read the book and then come back and join us.
Absolutely. So let's talk about Perrotta.
Okay,
Kate.
let's dive right in.
I entered this book under the conception that it was a satire. I really wanted it to be a satire of apocalyptic literature. Mm-hmm. To me, it just wasn't that at all. Like I don't know. I had this idea in my head that it was going to be this funny thing, and it really was this very unique take on how people deal with grief in an apocalyptic situation. And I didn't think it was very funny at all. Did you?
You know, I thought there were funny elements. You know, he said in many interviews that he's not a satirist. He writes very human stories. And hi, Wendy.
Hey.
And I think that, you know, this is a work of, it has the apocalypse in it, but it's a very human story. So I think he did a very clever thing by making the rapture or the rapture-like happening unclear.
Well, he never does. It had already happened. It's never even mentioned. It's just what did he call it?
I don't even know if it's like the missing.
The missing, yeah. And it's almost like it's just this thing that's understood between everybody that it happened and they dealt with it. And the one part that I liked in it that kind of solidified the confusion of it all is he mentioned it's not like a 9/11 event, or it's not like a solid event where you have this image, this single image of this terrible thing happening, because it happened to 2% of the population. And it happened everywhere, so there's really not this one unifying, defining thing that caused it. So I that was part of the beauty of the book to me, was that the disappearance of your loved ones or of your family, it meant something different to each person, and the visual thing that they had could have been, like I think one of the characters, his wife, she loses a baby in an ultrasound. Yeah. And that's her image of it. I mean, that's the thing that stuck with her. Whereas there's not, you know, it's not buildings burning or anything like that. To me, this book was all about being internalized.
It's interesting because he wrote this book right around the 10th anniversary of 9/11, and so a lot of that is kind of, I don't know, infused into this in a very particular way. But instead of, like you said, 9/11, where, you know, there was a cause or there was a specific event, this is never explained. So it's up to each character, you know, to decide what that means. So if you're a believer and you believe it's the rapture, you know, you're going to behave very differently than someone who doesn't know. And Perrotta never actually explains whether it was the rapture or whether it wasn't the rapture.
I think it's left to each character, or each, depending on where they're at, spiritually or emotionally, to come up with it themselves. I think that's what made part of this so interesting.
Well, I think, you know, you can see this in the characters of the Garveys. You know, they're the main family, and each of them, you know, handles it a little bit differently. And, you know, particularly with Lori Garvey, and I wanted to talk about her because, you know, she was the character I found that most difficult to relate to. You know, you could see how Tom would go and follow Holy Wayne. You could kind of see how Jill would, you know, have troubles in school and move on. But Lori just knew that this was the rapture. She knew it in her heart. And so you're going to act very differently if there's no future ahead of you. But I can't reconcile her leaving her family as a mother. It bothered me a lot.
What I thought was interesting about all three of them with that whole family is, you know, most people, you have this family experience, this upbringing, this focus, whether it's spiritual or whatever it is, and to have them all react, the son react totally differently than his mother. For those of you that don't know, there are a couple different I don't want to call them cults, but religious fanatic groups that react differently to this disappearance event.
And they spring up because of it. They weren't in existence before.
Right. And the Lori Garvey joins one, and her son joins another that is the goals and the aims of both groups are totally different. Like the one is they wear all white and they start smoking cigarettes, and their role is never really defined. I mean, because they genuinely believe, well, none of this matters. Whereas her son joins Holy Wayne, and it's, what is it, a free hug movement or something? Or they're going to heal everyone?
Well, it comes from a very human part, I think, because, you know, Holy Wayne starts out as a very human person, and he's a man who has lost his 8-year-old boy. I mean, just completely missing. And he doesn't know, you know, what to do with himself. And he ends up, you know, kind of discovering a gift about himself, basically, where he can take pain, an energetic transmission, pain from someone else. And I have seen this happen. And, you know, if we were going to debate what group we're going to join,
right.
I'd join Holy Wayne, and of course,
and
you know,
I totally would not.
But it starts out very human, and I mean, who wouldn't want to have some of their pain lifted after such a horrific event, especially inexplicable? You know, if you're left with complete grief, you know, wouldn't you want to have some of that pain lifted? And of course, he becomes less than holy. But I can
because
understand.
He takes on multiple underage wives.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
which often happens, and you know, but that's also a very human response to he's also a human person that other people take as a guru or somehow greater than, and he has many failings as well, and you know, it comes to that.
See, and I don't.
So you would join the guilty remnant, wouldn't you?
I totally would, because I think I would be so upset at the status quo, at the people that were just going about their everyday lives. And please, don't think for a second, like going to IKEA and buying their coffee and doing all those things like it's normal. I'm all about that. That's fine. However, to pretend like it never happened and just, oh, you know, my brother or sister are gone, or my entire, well, like Nora in the book, her entire family is wiped out. They are gone without any explanation, and she doesn't join any group.
No.
I don't know that if I had to join one, it would be the guilty remnants, because I don't think I could keep the status quo. But I think, to me, in this book anyway, Nora is one of those central characters in the book, because she finds a way to deal with her loss within herself. And I think throughout the book, her and Kevin, thank you, are dealing with it different ways, but they're looking for it within each other, and they don't succumb to these groups, or they don't find it in these groups, so they find it sort of in each other, but particularly Nora.
Oh, that's an interesting point too, and I think you're right, because I think she's the most honest with, you know, reality as it was. I mean, when she finally writes that letter to Kevin saying why she couldn't be with him and that she resented him for wanting to know more about what happened, because I think sometimes people do glub on to, well, my pain's bigger than your pain, and you know, I've lost the most. When she writes that letter to him, she admits basically that the night that her children disappeared, she wasn't having that great of a night. She yelled at her kids. You know, the apple juice spilled, and then she went into the other room. Her family was gone, and she wiped up the apple juice and went on about her business.
And she was almost grateful.
Yeah.
Like, oh, the noise stopped for a second, and then I think, like, and I think that's so human, and I think that, and maybe that's why I like her, because that's a very real response, and she's not kidding anybody. You know what I mean? I don't think she had any misconceptions about that, but it took her this whole experience to learn that in herself. And I think she's remorseful for it, sure, for thinking that now, but I don't know, I think she's a better person for recognizing it herself.
Well, that's really interesting. We're going to talk about guilt, and that she recognizes that she feels guilty because of those feelings, and then you look at the group, people that join the guilty remnant, to say that I'm left behind, I am guilty, and I'm going to remind all of us that we are also guilty. So who's hanging on? You know, who has more attachment?
See, and I took it a different way. I didn't think it was attachment. I took it as who's crazier. Truly. Like, is it the people that do nothing, or is it those folks that are hanging on to all this guilt for living? For what? I mean, it's never really stated what they're guilty for.
Well, they don't know, but they believe that they were left behind for a reason, and that they need to bear witness, you know, to make everybody else remember why they were left behind. But basically it's about renouncing, surrendering, renouncing all of attachments.
Yeah.
And basically surrender to the fact that, you know, they don't have a future. And people that know they have a future or hope to have a future act very differently than those who don't.
Well, and I guess, to me, the thing about the ending of the book is, I guess we could sit here and argue the book is not very action-packed.
No.
It's very heady, and it's very internalized. So is it hopeful? I mean, I like to think that the book is hopeful through all the guilt and all the pain, because it's a very painful, dark, internalized book. Is there a glimmer of hope at the end? Not for everybody.
Well, I think there's hope. I certainly do. I think that's one of, you know, the author's main points. And there's a quote in the book on page 297, and this is from Kevin's point of view, and he said he'd seen this process before. It didn't matter what happened in the world: genocidal wars, natural disasters, unspeakable crimes, mass disappearances, whatever. Eventually people got tired of brooding about it. Time moved on, seasons changed, individuals withdrew into their private lives, turned their faces toward the sun. On balance, he thought it was probably a good thing. So, you know, to me, that's kind of one of the points of the whole book, is that, yes, people do get over these horrific things probably a little too fast, and maybe not give them enough credence, you know, but, you know, we're hopeful creatures. We're here, we're living. You know, life does have to go on.
It does.
It does. And what does the life consist of? You know, and that's the choices that these characters are making. So I find it hopeful in that respect, and especially, you know, with the ending. And let's talk about the ending.
Sure. The baby at the end. Nora's family is decimated, and Kevin's son, this baby was supposed to be the Messiah, the savior of the Free Hug group.
Yeah.
This illegitimate child, and the child was left there. And Nora, of all people, is the one who discovers this child. To me, that's her coming full circle, and that's her. I mean, that was her role. That was her being. Was her family, and she's rebuilding this slice of the world that she knew. To me, that's hopeful.
Yeah, that is hopeful, and when you bring a baby into the world, whether it's an accident or whether it's planned, it's just that it's an act of hope. And whether you come to, you know, a baby by, you know, stumbling over it like she did, you know, that's very hopeful. And it's very interesting that you do the connection between Nora and this baby, because, you know, the mother of the actual baby, you know, left to join the barefoot people.
They were a bunch of hippies.
Yeah. Well, she couldn't deal with it, you know. and the barefoot people and the guilty remnant, you know, they shirk responsibility, and of course, hope requires responsibility. And I think that you know, it worked out for a reason. Now I know a lot of people who read this book wanted some answers right away about what happened, and what did you think about it?
I don't know. I don't think I need answers at the end of this. I like where it is. I like not knowing what happens to Kevin's wife.
Mm-hmm.
I like thinking that, because Nora and Kevin really left it, you didn't know what page they were on. All you saw was her with this baby.
Mm-hmm.
I like them frozen in that moment. I really do, because anything is possible.
Right.
So I don't know. I like it better up to my imagination than. What about you?
I agree. I don't think it needs to be answered. I don't think that was the point at all. I don't think it. You know, there's so many inexplicable things about life, and that's really kind of the wonder of it, and what makes our choices and our you know, desires and all of our lives so interesting. And so
I liked Perrotta's take on an apocalyptic type fiction, where you have a book like The Return, which was also a TV show, or you have Under the Dome by Stephen King, or you have like Walking Dead is a very good example, where it is action, it is more about survival, and this was more about coping to me. And actually, any of these books that we are mentioning, we do have a list of read-alikes that we're going to share with you, so please click on it, and you can get those from the library catalog. Most of them are either in eBook or standard book format, so don't think if you miss them, there's more titles there. But I like his take on a contemporary, like most times in apocalyptic fiction is like, it's this world, but it's a different version. To me, to put it squarely in suburbia and have it be this internal struggle was way more interesting to me.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the pathos of the book, and I don't actually enjoy apocalyptic literature in general.
It's overdone.
Well, and this is different in the fact that it is an inexplicable event. It's not that human beings have wrought waste to the land and we've ruined ourselves and all of our chances of survival on the land, which is a lot. It's kind of depressing to me. But this is a very human-oriented book. So even if you don't like apocalyptic literature, you know, this would be something that you might like. So.
Okay, for those of you that have been kind of playing along at home with Perrotta, we're going to kind of move on to a little end-of-the-year treat for everybody.
Yeah.
We want to talk about some of our favorite titles of 2014 and some of those books that are upcoming that really have us excited. So we do have a special guest who's kind of been popping in and out here. Wendy Bartlett is here. She is actually, as my son would put it, my son is 4 years old, and he thinks that I come into work and I pick the books. But actually, Wendy is the one here that picks the books. So Wendy, welcome. You are our collection development and acquisitions manager.
Yep.
So thank you for joining us.
Hi, Wendy.
Hi. Hi, everybody.
How you doing?
Good. I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on. This has been fascinating to listen to you guys. And before we get any further, I need to know this. So are the barefoot people one of my options? We've got Holy Wayne. We've got the remnant people. Do I get to pick the barefoot people? Is that
You
one?
You can. Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
cool. I think I want barefoot people. I didn't like the other two choices.
Okay, so we are definitely a split three-way decision.
Wow.
That's right.
Which cult we would join.
Give me the hippies any day. I'm sorry. You know, now or there, or now or later, I'll take the hippies.
Fantastic.
Okay, so Wendy, we are talking some of our favorite selections of the year. Do you have any favorite titles that stand out to you as favorite picks?
You know, it was a lovely, lovely year for books. There were just tremendous things written this year, and I will just reiterate what Matthew said earlier. If you have a favorite out there in Google Hangout land, by all means, let us know. I'd love to hear what some of your favorites were this year, because there are a lot of choices. There are a lot of options this year. But yeah, we have some books that are, I would say, don't miss kind of books that have kind of really popped out as just truly, truly extraordinary this year, and I think there's some good ones to talk about a little bit tonight. And one of them, actually a couple of them, Kate, both you and I have read them. So I think we ought to start with those because they got 2 votes essentially, with you and I both really thinking they were very special. I think probably my absolute number 1 this year is a book called All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr, and he spells his last name Doerr. Kate, you want to start and just tell people a little bit about the book and what you liked about it?
Well, first of all, just the writing in this is exquisite. Just the way he puts together a sentence is just amazing. It goes back and forth in time. It jumps around a little bit. It's set in World War II, and it goes between a young lady and a young man. And Wendy, can you give the details a little bit? I just remember the experience of reading this was just exquisite.
Yeah, and I think you probably zeroed in right away on a couple of things I liked. I think Doerr's use of language is very, very, very good. He's known more for his short stories. This may be his first full-length novel, if not certainly his longest one to date. But he writes very much like a short story writer. Every sentence is very well considered. Every paragraph is very well considered. And one of the things that one of my friends pointed out on a different end of the year show I did last week that I didn't even really catch is that what Doerr does is to use very short chapters so that each chapter almost could be a short story by itself. Nice. And that's 2 things. It's a long book, kind of. It's not huge, but it's fairly long. But it's structured very, very well. And at least for me, Kate, I had trouble putting it down. Because you'll read about one of the characters, and we'll talk about them in a second here, but you read about one character, and in your mind you're thinking, well, while this is happening to him, what's going on with character number 2? So you sort of want to keep continuously, it's a page-turner for the type of book it is. It's kind of surprising to say, but it was just fascinating, and the structure is very good, as well as the use of language. But for those folks who may not have heard about the book, it's set in World War II. The action begins in a walled city that actually really exists because I Googled it because I'm like, tell me this is a real place because I have to go there someday. It's the island. It's a walled city called Saint-Malo, which is in France, and it was bombed during World War II. So the book opens as this walled city is being bombed, and you know that these 2 characters are there. What you don't know is how they got there. So it's a young German soldier. Young man who grows up tremendously disadvantaged, and the Nazis choose him for his technical ability. He's really, really smart, really kind of got an engineer's brain, and they come to him and say, we'll put you through school. And of course, this is a fledgling Nazi organization at that time. They aren't the Nazis at this point in time. And if we do that, then your sister will be supported, and the lady, he and his sister were orphans, but the lady who raised them was like the landlady, and they helped her out, so he was able to make a better life for his family if he went to the school. And of course, as the reader, we know what his fate is going to be because he goes in very innocently to this school as an engineering kid, and we all know what's going to happen. Of course, he ends up being a soldier, what have you. But his transformation and his internal moral struggles are very, very interesting to read about. The other character with whom I just fell in love is a young, blind French girl. She goes blind about the age of 10 or 12, Kate, do you remember? Fairly young.
I think it was earlier than that. I think she was
it? And her father works at the Natural History Museum. So he takes her to work with him because there was no school for a child like that at that time. And she spends her time in the various rooms of the museum. She likes to touch all the seashells because she can feel how they feel and how different they are. So we get this wonderful sort of tactile tour of this museum because this blind child is in playing. It was a fascinating part of this book. And her father teaches her how to go around the city by building her models of the city that she can touch. And so she learns where all the buildings are and where all the streets are and so forth. So she's a very interesting character, and her family and her relationships, and she ends up in this walled city when it starts to become... So their journey and how their 2 stories converge is really what the book's about, and it's awesome. I just thought it was one of the best for sure. And Doris got a Cleveland connection. He actually grew up here, so.
Cool.
Yeah, very, very good.
So we don't forget, folks, if you have your own best of titles, please don't hesitate to submit them in the Q&A.
Yep. And we'll share them with everybody.
Yes, we would love to share them.
Yes, we will. We'd love to hear what's out there and what you're up to, because there was a lot to choose from. So I think that's my number one, probably. I don't know. Would you say that's your number one?
I would say that's my number one, but it just talking about it now reminds me that my other favorite also had kind of a similar structure where
You're right.
two characters that go back and forth in two different voices, writing incredible, and the book I'm referring to is Sue Monk Kidd's Invention of Wings. And I admit that I hadn't read any Sue Monk Kidd before this. She's known mostly for Secret Life of Bees and some other novels, but this book really impressed me. The way she was able to get into her characters, the premise, and help me out, Wendy, but it goes back and forth between Sarah, who is a young girl in the South, who's well educated, and she gets a slave for her birthday when she becomes 11, and she's pretty progressive, and she is pretty horrified by the prospect and tries to set her slave free, and is unsuccessful doing that. And the story follows her and her slave Handful throughout the course of their lives, and it's just amazing how she puts it together. What did you think of it, Wendy?
Well, I completely agree with you. I really liked Secret Life of Bees. I did not think that Sue Monk Kidd had a lot of home runs in between that book and this one. So I actually, to be very honest with you, didn't even have it on my list to read. And one of my friends at work, Terry Thompson, who works in our department, said, "Oh my gosh, you have got to listen to this book on audio. They do it really, really well." I said, okay. I threw it in the cart. Well, it was fantastic. She did a terrific job. And I would just say this to our listeners: if you are looking for a book for your book discussion group, I think the one we just talked about, All the Light We Cannot See, would be great. But this is a phenomenal book discussion group. One of the things I found really interesting about it, the character of Sarah, who is the slave-owning girl, and Handful, who's the slave that grows up with her, we find out a lot about those two women, but we also find out a lot about their mothers. The mothers are very interesting characters in this book. Sarah Grimke's mother is not remotely a nice person, and really represents the old, dyed-in-the-wool plantation owner, slavery can never change, and she's just awful, and is awful to the slaves that grow up and live on the plantation or live in the home. Handful's mother never stops trying to be free. Despite 2 or 3 unsuccessful attempts, she fights and she fights and she fights. Another way to look at this book, and that I would highly recommend, sometimes customers will say to us, "I really like a book that takes me to a certain place." And this one is set in Charleston. And I've been to Charleston a couple of times, and Sue Monk Kidd does an astounding job of making you feel like you are in Civil War era Charleston. And actually, Charleston has not changed a great deal. So a lot of the places she'll say it's the intersection of this or that, you're like, I've been there, oh my goodness. So if you're someone who likes those kind of things that gives you a certain setting, she does a beautiful job with Charleston. She uses real-life characters. There was a slave there named Denmark Vesey who actually staged a slave rebellion, and unsuccessfully, and was hung for it. And these girls are witnesses to that whole era. So sometimes writers find out so much about a person. Sarah Grimke, we should say, Kate, we neglected to say, that is a real person that this is based on. The rest of it is fictionalized, but sometimes writers use real characters like that, and it does not come off. There's the fiction part, and then there's, hey, here's your history, and it's very kind of wooden. And I thought Sue Monk Kidd did a masterful job. Literally, I was Googling things to say, like, did that really happen, or did she make that up? You know what I mean? That's how well she blended it. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I think that Denmark Vesey guy is real. I think I remember hearing things, and sure enough, so I kind of caught up on his story a little bit. So I think that's something that a lot of historical novelists are very challenged to do well, and Sue Monk Kidd did an astounding job with balancing all that.
I agree, and this was something that could have turned out, really poorly if she had not gotten that character just perfect of both of them. And I think she does a really nice job of making sure that relationship is believable, because it's not always an even par, and she does a lot with guilt and gratitude and friendship, and it's very uneasy, and I think it rings true. And so I just highly recommend it, and I've done it for my book group, and it was a great discussion.
I bet it was. Yeah, I thought as I was reading it, thought I'd love to do this with a book group, because I think it's really, really rich, and I think there's really a lot there. So I'm glad it worked for your group. I'm not surprised. I really thought that when I listened to it when it first came up. So in case you missed that title, it's called The Invention of Wings, like bird wings, by Sue Monk Kidd, Kidd. Once again,
I'm going to throw a wild card out there and switch from historical fiction, because I don't particularly read historical fiction. And one of my favorite books of the year was something I typically don't read at all, and that's horror fiction. I am a nonfiction guy through and through. And around Halloween, I was looking for something scary. I just wanted something to just get me away. And the book that really stuck with me was called The Boy Who Drew Monsters by Keith Donahue. And I don't know if either of you guys read it. And to me, this book was more like it was kind of like, not horror fantasy, because there was definitely fantastic elements in it, but it was all about mood for me. So when you were talking about Sue Monk Kidd really creating this sense of place, this book took me to a very creepy place. It's the story of a 10-year-old boy with Asperger's who it's on the coast of Maine, and he almost drowns as a child. And he develops this intense agoraphobia, and he is convinced. He goes through these phases where to cope with his anxiety and this and that he draws.
Okay.
And these nightmares that he has because he can't sleep, and all these things going on in his head, they come to life with what he's drawing. And it terrorizes him and his family. And
that is creepy.
It's terrifying. But it's not can jump out and get you kind of terrifying. It's like just this general unease and this general fog around this whole story and this poor boy. And he finds this ally in this housekeeper who has had the same problem, and it brings in this weird Asian element, and it's rooted in this very creepy mythology, and it'll haunt you.
Wow.
It'll haunt you. You can't sleep, haunt you.
Yeah,
I don't want to give away what happens.
I don't like that, but yeah, I wonder how many horror books have housekeepers in them.
This one does. So yeah, I don't typically read those kind of books, but it just really stuck with me. Really stuck with me. So if you're looking for a creepy read in the wintertime, it's very bleak. Okay. So if you're looking for something to get you through a winter where you don't want to sleep, this will do it.
Okay. Well. But don't give this to a book group in the winter.
Please do not.
Okay.
Please do not.
We'll wait till summer.
Wendy, you had mentioned prior to us coming on, you had a Richard Flanagan title.
I do. And I'm just going to do, if you don't care, Matt, I'll just do a couple of brief ones and some other titles before we run out of time. Is that okay?
Yeah, please.
All right. Okay. Because these are great, and I don't want people to miss them. But the one Matt is referring to is called The Narrow Road to the Deep North by Richard Flanagan. It's about Richard Flanagan is a phenomenally wonderful writer. He's from Australia. This book took the Booker Prize this year, and Richard Flanagan I've been reading for years, and when people are like, what are you reading? And I say, oh, this great book by Richard Flanagan, they go, who? No one knows about this guy. So I was so delighted when he took the Booker, because this book is extraordinarily well done. It's not very long. But talk about intense. If any of our listeners or watchers out there read Unbroken by Hildebrand, it's sort of the same theme. What is really interesting about this book, though, is that it's based on Flanagan's father, who was captured by the Japanese and then helped to build a railroad that the Japanese wanted to build as a prisoner of war. That's the main storyline. The storyline that you can't stop reading about, though, is he also pins under this story one of the most compelling and beautiful love stories I've ever read in a book. And it's just incredible. And talk about lyrical and beautiful writing, and he talks about poetry throughout. It's not a light read by any stretch of the imagination, but it's one of the best books you'll ever read in your life, and it will stick with you forever. So The Narrow Road to the Deep North by Richard Flanagan, also 2 thumbs up. Do we have time for a couple of nonfics?
Sure.
That are real quick ones.
I want to make sure we talk about the 2015s.
Yes, right. I'll make this quick. Age of Ambition by Evan Osnos, O-S-N-O-S. Took the National Book Award for nonfiction. It's about mod economy as the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. That's not supposed to happen in a communist country. And one of their biggest challenges is keeping a lid on the internet. Good luck with that. And he does he's a journalist, so he tells it very, very well. Last but not least, don't miss Jerry Lee Lewis, His Own Story by Rick Bragg, who writes for all kinds of things. Yeah. Rick Bragg is one of my favorite writers ever. And he takes Jerry Lee Lewis's story, but he also tells the story of, like, the Civil Rights South and rock and roll at the same time. If you read Rick Bragg, you know what I'm talking about.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Amazing. It's a tremendous, tremendous book. So those are my faves.
So, Wendy, do you have any what are the hottest titles that you see on your radar coming up?
Well, I've got 3 that are coming out that I think people will really like. If folks out there liked Water for Elephants, which was out a few years ago, Sarah Gruen has a new one. My friend Faye at work picked this up off my bookshelf. This actually releases in June. It's called At the Water's Edge. And it's about a well-to-do group of friends, and they're kind of aimless. They're not real serious about life. They've got tons of money. So it's a story about class during World War II, and what they set out to do, because they have nothing better to do, is find the Loch Ness Monster, which sounds silly, but it's a really wonderful character study. And it's that same kind of quirky yet relatable characters that you saw in Water for Elephants. So 2 thumbs up for this one. It's coming out in June. What else do we have coming? Oh, there's an interesting one called Jam on the Vine. And I'm sorry, I don't have that author written down. Ida B. Wells was a pioneering African-American journalist, and that is who this book is modeled on. So there, again, it is historical fiction based on a real person, but it's getting early, huge buzz, so I think it's going to be a good one. And for those of you who have read this guy's a favorite in our book group world, Stuart Onan, who's from Pittsburgh, I cannot wait to read this book. It's called West of Sunset, and it's about F. Scott Fitzgerald when he was in Hollywood, and Zelda was in the North Carolina in the sanitarium trying to get her head together, and kind of his big affair with Sheila Graham. So also based on real characters, but Stuart Onan is a phenomenally beautiful writer, so I'm really excited to see that book. I believe that's January. That one will be the one that comes out first.
Well, I think we should mention that Stuart Onan's going to be at our Beechwood branch.
Oh, thank you.
Do you know when that's going to be?
No. Check the Beechwood webpage. I think it's soon. I think it's early January.
We'll post a link on the YouTube of this Hangout, so you guys, any of you interested, will have it there.
Awesome. Yeah, he got a nice article a nice interview in Publishers Weekly about Stuart Onan and about this book and the research that he did and his longtime fascination with Fitzgerald. So I think these characters are treated very lovingly, and of course he's a writer who does character so well. So I think this is going to be a big win.
One of my favorite books that I'm excited about, my introduction to Neil Gaiman was at random in college. I picked up a book of short stories of Neil Gaiman's, and I used to know it by heart. Actually, it was his version of Beowulf as told as if it was on the set of Baywatch.
Awesome.
Yeah, and it was in this collection of like short stories, and he has a new collection of collected works coming out in summer, I think. I don't know exactly when it's coming out.
How did I miss this one?
It's called Trigger Warning. It is an anthology of previously published pieces. It's be a little bit of stories, verse, and then he has his own 50th anniversary Doctor Who story in there too. So like you can totally nerd out on that. So I'm very excited. If you're a Neil fan.
Oh.
Kate, do you have a favorite that's coming out?
So here I've been waiting years, and I check his website every year to see does he have a new book. Does he have a new book? And Eric Larson, who's pretty much the master of narrative nonfiction, wrote Devil in the White City, Thunderstruck, a number of other books. He's got Dead Wake coming out about the sinking of the Lusitania, and I've got it. One of the perks of being a librarian is we get advanced readers copies. So this book doesn't come out till March, but this is what I'm going to be reading over my holiday break. So very excited. Dead Wake comes out in March.
That's awesome. Absolutely awesome. I want to thank everybody for joining us. Kate, thank you. Wendy, thank you very much.
You guys, this was really fun.
This was a blast. We have talked a lot about read-alikes. We've talked a lot about upcoming titles for 2015, as well as some of our favorites for 2014. For you folks watching and playing along at home, we will have links to our catalog, so if you do want to request any of those, they will be available. We've put lists together for you to check those out yourselves. So thanks everybody for coming.
Great, and check us out on, we'll be on YouTube, so if you want to check us out later, check us there.
So thanks. Good night.
Good night.